Thank you very much, Gilbert, and kia ora. Welcome everybody to this event as being held as part of the International Festival of Beat Poetry. I was approached by a poet in the States and asked if I'd organise an event where I lived, and I told her, sure, yeah, I love beat poetry and I'd like to get involved in that. And she thought I lived in Greenland, and she thought Greenland was part of the States as well. Anyway, we ended up with an international festival. And over this month there are similar events happening all over the world. And this is ours. Beat poetry evolved in the 1940s, and it was dedicated to breaking boundaries and bridging cultures. It was a great movement of dissatisfaction in the country, and the way that they approached this dissatisfaction was through the exposure of non-traditional poetry from people of all backgrounds. So poets such as Allen Ginsberg, Gary Snyder and Gregory Corso questioned mainstream politics and culture with their work. And now the poets that are here with me tonight are going to expose themselves and see where these questions have got us 70 years later. First up is going to be Gill Ward, and Gill is probably known to quite a few of you as the convener of the Poets to the People monthly poetry group, as well as all other aspects of poetry. She's a bit of an expert here. And then after Gill, we'll have Michael O'Leary with his sidekick, Gilbert Haisman. Then Jane Graham George, who you'll probably know from the local library, if not from other poetry meetings and scenes and so on. And then we have Rob Hack. Rob is a wonderful poet, and he is here too. And he's going to give us a look at his view of the beat world. And then to wrap it up, I'll read a few poems myself. So, to get us going, let's welcome Gill Ward.
Am I going to use this?
You can.
Yeah, because I can put these things here.
Absolutely.
Okay, can you hear me all right? This one's on, is it?
Yep.
You hear me? Good. Yep. Right. I'm probably the sole person who's reading tonight who was actually sort of around when the beat poets were around. And one of our instructions, which was sent from the States, was to read a little bit from some of these beat poets, and then to say whether we were influenced in our poetry ourselves and read some of our own. So I thought I'd like to do a woman poet from the States, and the woman that I chose was Anne Walden. She was around in the 60s. She was born in 1946 or 5, and that made her a bit younger than the others. She was sort of like a second generation beat poet, but she did hang out with Ginsberg, who once described her, for whatever reason, as a spiritual wife. Maybe he couldn't get anything else out of her, so she said she was spiritual. But she's still alive, and she's still teaching poetry, and she's a performance poet. And she's in Boulder, Colorado, at something that used to be like an institution or something. It's now a university. That's Naropa University. So she's still using her talent with more groups of young people coming along. Now, one of the things I really like is when poets write poems for other poets. And so I hunted around through Anne's poetry, and there was another beat poet called Frank O'Hara, who was a famous American beat poet, and she had rung him, so she's written him a poem when she was in San Francisco and wishing that she was back in New York, where she was brought up in Greenwich Village. So this is called A Phone Call from Frank O'Hara. Was living in San Francisco, my heart was in Manhattan. It made no sense, no reference point. Hearing the sad horns at night, fragile evocations of female stuff. The three tones, the last most resonant, were like warnings, haiku musings at dawn. The call came in the afternoon. Frank, is that really you? I'd awake, chilled at dawn, in the wooden house like an old ship, stay bundled through the day, sitting on the stoop to catch the sun. I lived near the park, whose deep green over my shoulder made life cooler. Was my spirit faltering, growing duller? I want to be free of poetry's ornaments, its duty, free of constant irritation, me in it. What was grander reason for being? Do it. Why? Why, Frank? To make the energies dance, etc. My coat a cape of horrors, I'd walk through town or impending earthquake. Was it that? Ominous days, streets shiny with hallucinatory light on sad gods. Too many religious people, or a woman, startled me by her look of indecision near the empty stadium. I walked back, spooked by my own darkness, when Frank called to say, "What? Not done complaining yet? Can't you smell the eucalyptus? Have you never neared the Pacific?" While Frank in free call, music why your sweet veins swell, he sang, quoting a metaphysician. Don't you know the secret, how to wake up and see you don't exist? But that does. Don't you see phenomena is so much more important than this. I always loved that. Always, I cried, wanting to believe him. Yes, but say more. How can you if you are sad and dead? But that's just it. If it isn't, it doesn't want to be. Do you want to be? He was warming to his song. Of course I don't have to put up with as much as you do these days, these years, but I do miss the colour, the architecture, the talk. You know, it was the life, and dying is such an insult. After all, I was in love with breath, and I loved embracing those others, the lovers with my body. He sighed and laughed. He wasn't quite as I remembered him, not less generous, but more abstract. Did he ever have a voice now, I wondered? Or did I think it up in the middle of this long day, phone in hand now, darling Manhattan? So she was homesick. Lovely. Thank you, Anne. And thank you, Mercedes, by the way, for going to all the trouble to organise this thing. Now, this is the one for this event. A morning poem by Frank O'Hara, and it just got little echoes of the same thing in it, waking up in the morning and things. I'm just reading a few verses of this. It's nice. I've got to tell you how I love you always. I think of it on grey mornings with death in my mouth. The tea is never hot enough then, and the cigarette dry. The maroon robe chills me. I need you, and look out the window at the noiseless snow. At night on the dock the buses glow like clouds, and I'm lonely thinking of flutes. I miss you always when I go to the beach. The sand is wet with tears that seem mine, although I never weep and hold you in my heart with a very real humour you'd be proud of. And the rest of the poem is lovely too. So I hope that's made you think again about some of those big poets, because all of us who've been preparing for this have certainly started reading and remembering all those things. Now, when let's do this. When I was 18, I wrote poetry. Here it is. You didn't expect that, did you? You didn't expect me to bring a book of my poems from when I was 18. But this was a new feeling for me, who'd been to a Catholic boarding school for 10 years of my life, and then started going to university and teachers college, and it was great. So I'm not going to read this poem, I'll just read you the first sort of verse of this one. I put it all down the page like you were supposed to, and this one was called Hysteria. Leave me alone. I know 3 words that go together. Leave me alone. Let me grow. Let me in my leave aloneness find myself. I think I could if you let me. So if you must, come with me to my place of leave us alone, and you can share it with me. Well, I won't go on, but you can see the words were all joined up, and I did it the right way you were supposed to. So then I had a poem published in a book that we put out at that time. It's famous for having people like David McGill in it, and James K. Baxter in it, and me, and a whole lot of others. Were you in that, Michael? No, you weren't. You were too young. Yeah. And so this was the poem. When my book came out, I wanted to sort of acknowledge long ago, and this was the poem that I wrote about going into town one Saturday morning into Wellington when we had 6 o'clock closing, and the streets were bare, and a few people, a few old men, I suppose they were old, they might not have been, in doorways. And I was just walking along, and this is the poem I wrote about it. It's called Sordid Saturday, Lambton Quay. Streets strewn with Friday night, washed the Saturday 10 a.m. sun, and my feet making a clean sound on the rubber muffled pavement. Passing tobacco men, eyeing me, and my eyes impersonally meeting with thick-rolled rimmed ones. Smells of staling dirt cityness when Saturday's cleanness shines on Friday's hangover that pads about the town and dust shuffles shit at slivers. And my smell, no smell but clean. Trams rumbling, trambling in the wind-vacuumed tunnel street of their wasted grind, drifting in the hollow forgottenness of empty buildings. I don't think it's too bad for when it seems I was 18. Thank you. Well, recently I wrote another poem, and it suddenly occurred to me that this poem was an absolute echo of that one, like 60 odd years ago. And not quite 60, but nearly. And it's called Once. And I was walking down Featherston Street to an early evening meeting that I was going to, and I suddenly thought this was a quicker way to come to the train than the way I used to come from the cable car down Stout Street, and I'd be running and huffing and puffing. And I suddenly thought about those days, and I wrote this poem. Once, it's called. A beguiling crepuscular dusk found me retracing old steps in a gentle city street, wondering why all those far years back I did not take this road to the train, but instead the grey wind tunnel of that parallel course, which took longer to reach, and which pummeled and hit the breath from me, anxious, and wheezing and watching the distant station clock in the stern brickwork, and my rough gasps keeping time with my thudding steps, every beat a little nearer, a little panic. Yet I remembered those friends of my youth with me then, as if they were here, meandering, laughing, with books and noise and little care. And I sat in the park, which was once a hotel, a 6 o'clocker, where you got someone's room number to tell if the police called, a Friday night gathering ground to find the party house, and over 50 years disappeared. You were all there, ghosts laughing in this dear town, and I thought, we are together still. Evenings like this we never left. So, in the Midland Hotel, you went there, on a Friday night to the lounge bar, and somebody said the room night, it's, the name of the person's Gill or something, it's room 27. So if the police came in after hours, and it was after 6 o'clock and you were drinking, you said you were somebody's guests in room 27. And then, you then find out where the next party was and all go there. Did you do that, David? Yeah. So those little things. I'm going to read one more little poem, just as a sort of homage to the poet that we all thought was our own beat poet, David Mitchell. This was his book that came out, He Died. Now, I wrote David a poem. He had motor neurone disease, and I wrote him a poem. It's a slight poem, but I sent it over to him, and he wrote me a letter in a pencil. I think that might have been the last letter that David Mitchell ever wrote, because he died very soon after that, and he just wrote it down a big page, and he said, that poem's publishable. Well, I didn't particularly think it was, but I thought, I've put it in this book for David. And it says, for DJM, David John Mitchell. Your photograph, and I think again of you and the young me, and how you picked me up with my bundle of poems and took me along, shy, exposed, and placed me down before your peers, and said, there was this girl, and she said, I have a poem. I said, show me, and she showed me. This girl with a whole book of poems, a whole book. And I remember that 50 years later, how you showed me, when I showed you the poems, how to be kindly and propitious and encouraging, and you know not how I never forgot that, ever. And so I didn't. So thank you, David, and thank you for listening. We could have an auction for my book of poems. Thank you. And thank you, Mercedes.
Thank you, Jill. That was wonderful, and I loved that beat.
Well, it's
in that poem of
coincidence.
yours. Yeah, it was
Really going to
perfect.
miss the train.
Perfectly coincidental. Okay, now Michael's going to come up, and Gilbert, and Finn, it's wonderful to see you.
Can you use this seat?
Yes, I'll go elsewhere. Okay, welcome Michael and Finn and Gilbert.
We're going to give them a rock star welcome. So you'll know what to do. You'll be cued. Could you stand further back so you're off stage?
Tēnā koutou katoa. Haere mai ki te whare waiata, ki te whare nā kupu, ki te whare nā inu. And nō reira, haere mai. I'm going to do what the beat poet did and break all the fucking rules, and I'm not going to do any beat poetry. But I'm going to say that the beat poet are the forerunners right through my generation, which included the Beatles and Bob Dylan, through to the rappers of today in their use of music and words coming together in a cultural way which is meaningful to young people when they're young and old people when they're old. Jack Kerouac first ever wrote the word beat after he visited Liverpool in the late 1940s, and he said it was the most beat city he'd ever been in, meaning it was bombed out and completely stuffed. And the next correlation of that is the way the Beatles spelt their name with the word beat in it. And the Beatles and Dylan, major influence on my life, and therefore I'm going to incorporate music with my performance. Thank you. I am a poet, I am a stone. The hard rock I am made of does not permit growth. The rain falls on me, the wind scours my surface, but I am resolute. Write about it? I can write about it. I am a poet, I am a stone. People come to study what I am made of, and in the past and in the present, their conclusions are the same. I remember dancing, and I remember singing, but I can never remember moving. After all, life is movement. Even bacteria moves, and I can't remember moving. I am a poet, I am a stone. Did Jesus play his guitar gently weeping for the world he'd come to save? Did his Moroccan musical instrument lament the captive slave? Did the Son of God, the Son of Man, the Son of a virgin woman too, rock and roll with his troubled times, saying, do what thee do? Did he take up David's lyre and sing with the Mary Magdalene in the tavern? Did they rave on the same old song like the likely lads in the cavern? Well, you're a long time dead, at least until eternity. So sing and relax, just. Whisper words of wisdom. We walked through the burnt out ruins. What's it?
Want to talk? Keep going.
Just read it. What's it say?
We walk through the blackened, charred ruins.
We walked through the blackened, charred ruins of the house where we had loved and fought. Memories flooded in like the dark night waves we used to watch at the end of the street. 2 years we lived there, we healed each other. Time stood still and let us be. No neighbours, but for the friends of your dog, Carla. Big Padge, Little Padge, Mr. Big. Zubu and Sambo walked the earth to tigers, searching for their special hacienda again. Photographs are all that remain. One of me on the porch, engulfed in flames. On each of Baudelaire's fancy wings have I flown. On wine, poetry, and the tailwind virtue have I in drunken chariots gone. Drink! 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 With a nebulous goal to find the limitless mind and soul. On! 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 Through light, time and sound. Too late! I fall to the ground, which I hit with a terrible smash. And as the phoenix turned to ash, you ask, like the bird, will you rise again soon? I answer yes, Sunday, Monday, or maybe Tuesday afternoon. Thank you to Gilbert and Finn. Finn's usually a man of few words. More words I've ever seen from him in my life. Thank you, Mr.
You even got the words the right way out.
You all right?
I think that'll, no, that one.
That one, yeah.
That's better. Okay, thank you very much, Michael and Co. Gilbert, there was beautiful music going along with that. And Finn, you turned those pages perfectly.
Let's just start upside down.
And Michael, wonderful. I love hearing you perform. I love it when you let rip and let go, because honestly, sometimes when you read, you're sort of very held in, and it's just wonderful to see you go. Okay, and now we're going to invite Jane up onto the mic. Jane Graham George, with her American accent, which will sound wonderful for the beat evening. Okay, big warm welcome for Jane.
That's okay. That's all right. I'll let everyone know what I was planning to do. That's okay.
Can you play CD in your computer?
I can, yeah. I wonder if it'll come out though.
Hey, Mercedes, don't worry about it. It's fine. Okay. Sort of a technical glitch, but I'll let you all use your imaginations. I was planning to play in the background as sort of a compliment, A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. So I'll let you all use your imaginations. It's, of course, very jazzy. She's going to try.
Just stir it up, the volume should be plenty, just for background.
I first became aware of the Beat Poets when I was an undergraduate at the University of Minnesota, and I read Howl by Allen Ginsberg in my Introduction to American Poetry class. It kind of blew my mind, and I guess if any of you have ever read the poem, you might have had the same experience. I continued to read beat poetry and be interested in the beats. I read all of Kerouac's books and read about Neil Cassidy and all the rest of them. And later in life, I decided I wanted to be a librarian, so I did this huge bibliography about the beats. And in this paper I wrote this: that the beats are still so widely read and appreciated is due to their spontaneity, their exaltation of values beyond the material, and finally, and perhaps most significantly, their accessibility. So I like poems that I can kind of understand. Maybe some of you feel the same, but there are different kinds of understanding. And I think if you understand with your heart, that's really what is most important. But I wanted to read just a little section out of Ann Charter's introduction to the Portable Beat Reader, which is a fantastic book. If any of you want to do more research or reading about the beats, this is a really great one. She describes this amazing evening, 6 poets at the Sixth Gallery in 1955 in San Francisco. Their reading that night was Allen Ginsberg, Michael McClure, Gary Snyder, Philip Whalen, Philip LaMantia, and Kenneth Rexroth. This is what Michael McClure said afterwards about that night. We were locked in the Cold War and the first Asian debacle, the Korean War. We hated the war and the inhumanity and the coldness. The country had the feeling of martial law. An undeclared military state had leapt out of Daddy Warbucks' tanks and sprawled over the landscape. As artists, we were oppressed, and indeed the people of the nation were oppressed. We knew we were poets, and we had to speak out as poets. We saw that the art of poetry was essentially dead, killed by war, by academies, by neglect, by lack of love, and by disinterest. We knew we could bring it back to life. We could see what Pound had done, and Whitman and Artaud and D.H. Lawrence in his monumental poetry and prose. We wanted to make it new, and we wanted to invent it and the process of it as we went into it. We wanted voice and we wanted vision. So Gary Snyder was one of the poets who read that night, and he's one of my favorite poets. I thought I'd just read 2 of his poems, an early one called Rip Rap. And Rip Rap is like the metal that you put down on forestry trails and walking and hiking trails. He worked for the forestry department in California. Lay down these words before your mind like rocks, placed solid by hands in choice of place, set before the body of the mind in space and time, solidity of bark, leaf, or wall, rip-rap of things. Cobble of Milky Way, straying planets, these poems, people, lost ponies with dragging saddles and rocky, surefoot trails. The world's like an endless 4-dimensional game of Go. Ants and pebbles in the thin loam, each rock a word, a creek-washed stone, granite ingrained with torment of fire and weight, crystal and sediment linked hot, all change in thoughts as well as things. What I like about Gary Snyder is that he talks about the workaday world, the everyday world. He talks about mindfulness, and he also talks about nature quite a lot. And I, too, am very interested in the natural world. The second poem of his that I wanted to read tonight is a poem called No Shadow. My friend Dean took me into the Yuba goldfields. That's at the lower Yuba River outflow where it enters the Sacramento Valley flatlands, a mile-wide stretch between grass and blue oak meadows. It goes on for 10 miles. Here's where the mining tailings got dropped off by the wandering riverbed of the 1870s, 40 miles downstream from where the giant hoses washed them off Sierra slopes. We were walking on blue lupin-covered, rounded, 100-foot gravel hills till we stood over the springtime rush of water, watched a female osprey hunting along the main river channel. Her flight shot up, down, all sides, suddenly fell feet first into the river and emerged with a fish, maybe fooling the fish by zigzagging, so no hawk shadowed. Carol said later, that's like trying to do zazen without yourself entering into it. Standing on a gravel hill by the lower Yuba, can see down west a giant Air Force cargo plane from Beale, hang gliding down to land, strangely slow over the tumbled, dredged out gold fields, practice run, shadow of a cargo jet, soon gone. No shadow of an osprey still here. I'll just read a few of my own poems, possibly, following in the same vein. I guess on the theme of aerodynamics. This one I wrote for the United Nations International Day of Peace. And I want to give a plug for this event, which happens at the Capita Uniting Parish every year. Is it the 19th of September this year?
It's a Sunday, not the 20th.
It's a Sunday.
I'll let you know.
It's so cool, though. If any of you believe in peace, like I do, you might like to come along. It's not religious per se, but lots of different religions are invited to participate. It's called In the Paddock. No danger here, just a bumblebee treading water, circling in the trough. I scoop her up with cupped hands, set her kindly on the grass to dry her dwarf wings in the sun. I'll sit on the overturned rusted bathtub, watch her convalesce, and admire the pied ducks who return because their duck great-grandparents came here when it was wetland. Whairoa stream sings along past the cattle stop, all the way to the sea. There is no war or killing in this paddock of moments. Even with the horse, it's just an ear shake or shoe fly tail. Bzz, bzz, bzz. Now the bee takes off, miracle of aerodynamics, cargo plane on a mercy mission to save the world. I think I'm doing okay time-wise here. This other poem is from a real early collection of mine, and it's about living in two worlds, because I'm American, and I've lived in New Zealand twice, and it doesn't have a title. It's kind of riffy and beat-like, so I hope you'll just kind of listen to it, because it kind of doesn't make any sense in a way, but I don't know, it's a little fun. I was driving around with a plate on the dash, as if expecting the Last Supper of Assisi to take form in my Austin. A bristling, mustachioed gentleman from the police force asked me how I had known to expect the best chefs of Acapulco. Sooner or later, it all becomes clear when words and their meanings are simultaneously known in their harmonious blend, and consciousness becomes deliberately engrossed in this new kind of knowledge. This is known as Savitarka Samapati, or thoughtful transformation. With the as yet unrevealed, proved the best thing to say to Officer Godbout on his rounds, and wondering about the precise make, model, and vintage of my vehicle in Bel Air. You see, I had airlifted the thing right over the Pacific via thoughts, and so clumsy still was I that it was a little like flying a B-52. But the view was atomic, and the officer was so interested I never even had to pay a dime, because all the time I was saying, like the main man and the wheel woman, Om and Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Yeah. I think maybe I'll just read one or two more, because we've got a couple more folks to read here.
You're doing good, Jan. Keep going.
What's that?
You're doing
Time's
good.
going
Yeah.
okay? All right. Well, here. Okay, I'll read this one because I'm kind of a horsey girl, as you guys say here. Let's find it. This one's called Galloping Meditation. And again, it takes place in two worlds. The long horizon above the pasture where I gallop is the canvas I have always been racing to meet. The gray alphabet of geese in an early winter sky draws me, a weary somnambulist, to reach for that vast wakefulness, love for all life, framed word, and unrhyming art. But I fight the cold sleep and find I must warm myself with the tangible. Up this hard dirt track today I fly, on the bay quarter horse as in summer, past sweet corn and raspberries, the big sound of hooves on turf like waves at Piha, watercolor mare's tails, in the sky, this entire vista created and felt and known with each animal's stride. I'll just finish with a couple of haiku, very short. In northern Minnesota, there's a lot of lakes there. You guys may have heard it's the land of 10,000 lakes, but there's really more like 20 or 30,000 lakes. Some of them are so small they hardly qualify. But I saw a moose one day taking a drink from a pond, and I wrote this haiku. And it actually won a haiku contest in Grand Marais, Minnesota. Every year they have a moose haiku contest. And this poem won, but I do kind of like it. It's called Broomstick Pond. Lifted from the pond, cloudburst from a moose's mouth, 1,000 petals. And just this last one, because maybe some of you saw this little foal at Poplar Avenue last year. There was this little Palomino foal, and it was so cute. It wasn't like a mini, but it was a small, small horse. And every day I used to drive past, and it was just so wonderful to see it. Sunny yellow foal, my heart smiles for a second, our endless summer. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mercedes.
Sunday the 20th.
Sunday the 20th, United Nations Day of Peace.
At the Kapiti Uniting Church in Raumati. Yeah. I was there last year and it was well worth it, and I'm going back again this year to read some more poems, and so is Gill, so hope we'll see a few people there. Thank you, Jane, that was just beautiful. I loved your haiku especially, and I'll have to remind you next time that we say them twice, a haiku. But they were lovely and left me wanting more too. Okay, Mr. Hack, Rob Hack, welcome.
Thank you. Hi everybody, thanks for coming along this evening and eating here. I'll crack straight into it. This is Miles, my percussionist. I've got a bit of an introduction here. I wasn't quite sure where I was going to be in the order, so here we go. What started the beat movement? The bloodshed of World War II, not so long after the horrors of World War I. The possibility of being blown to bits by an atom bomb. And who were the beats? Non-violent pacifists who hated the conformism, racism, materialism, and other isms of newly affluent post-war America and its anti-communist paranoia. But were they just lazy middle-class rebels without a job, experimenting with sex, drugs, religion, siding with feminist and black America, who brought their spontaneous jazz-inspired polemic and socio-political rant off the page and into the smoky cafes and clubs of Greenwich Village and San Francisco, or the West Coast? Whoever beats were, whatever beat was, people took notice, and 60 years later, in a far-flung, hilly and sheepish country, we remember them at the going down of the sun, the moon, and Jupiter's a balloon. Here's my tribute to the beats. Early signs, make it new. Dada leaped like a bomb, beheading society, slitting the throat of the passé, cutting capitalists off at the pass. Revolt at the lost generation, piled corpse high in trenches, or buried in rich dust in the corner of a foreign killing field. Invert the upturned urinals of nationhood, reject military, boot nationalism to the back page. Surrealism, born from Mother Dada when irrational rationality met Freud's mother and unconsciously got dreams interpreted like. Dali, your Andalusian dog shock of an automatic nightmare shone like a fascist boot, razor across the eye. Futurism sped toward oniric onanism, searching for what had never been or could ever be. Ginsberg, your mother is a communist. You howl down the Negro streets in a subterranean dawn. San Francisco, the town and the city, a beat, hunched over, a naked lunch, then back on the road to Denver, Joliet, Bakersfield, 1947. Dean Moriarty in a Sal Paradise summer. But Jack loved only his mother, and whiskey dreams of a check shirt America, and a mystical Catholic vision of death. The typewriter writes, and having writ moves on and on. 3 weeks, 120 feet, a papyrus highway of hullabaloo, backseat hand jobs at 60 miles an hour, another benzene stop with Levi empty pockets, right foot heavy down, escape in a dust cloud slide, another greyhound town. Benzodrine and a bullet for Joan. Low life's at the Angel Bar, the real thing, man. Flat out, broke, busted and beat. We walk a mile for a camel or a Vicky Russell trick. William Burroughs, adding machine, air, inventor of the first steam-powered dildo. Joan Vollmer loved this man's mind, loved Benzodrine more, grew a skin full of sores, raved on into a padded white coat in a room with no view at somewhere Bellevue. Mexico under a mushroom cloud of marijuana, these cats will blow your mind. Mexico, where gun-ho William tells it was an accident, senor, a single bullet in her brain. She went under the ground, he went south for a stronger fix. Tangiers too, because prison's a tomb, folds you up like a poem stuck in a book, away from the ecstasy, the river of life, only he could walk over. A Milwaukee bruise on America's brain. A man dies in his dairy among cigarettes and beer. Blood like a river runs to the sea of newspapers that spill bad news of a rocks in your head economy. Rocket down Highway 66. That a Pontiac in your pocket? Eric Barner crosses himself, crosses the plains in search of himself, drives a Mustang like a bullet, muscle cars named after horses, and tribes like the world's fastest Indian buried at Wounded Knee and broken-hearted. Not faster than a land claim, or an iron horse across a Cheyenne plain. What made Milwaukee famous made a good Indian dead. Hiroshima dust. I punch you in the pawpaw, eh? A Japanese writer disembowels himself in the dust of Hiroshima. This moment is where it's at. Be out of it before you're in it. Dig it, man. No need to get Sartre about it. A suicide note on a bedroom door hangs still as an oak leaf before it dies, flies south to a Donna summer winter of disco tent. Cool as clutch cargo. Neat as Alfred Hitchcock's pert little mouth. Violent as a viola in a 2-bit Tarantino. Fundamental religions fundamentally flawed. Used by date. A leaky build. Too many cooks. Cassock lifters. A supreme being, not Diana Ross, but invisible. Mere cladding on a house frame like Plato's cave, where shadows grow large behind your back, like mould in a state house wall. There's a hole in the boy's lung. Well, fix it, dear John. Look, you know, when I have all the facts in front of me, I'll get the appropriate authorities to review it. By the way, here's a selfie of me and $50 million. Seen this one of Max and me golfing with the Prez in Hawaii? There's Max looking in a mirror, and there's me up Obama's bum. In this one, I'm quite far up China's bum. And here's me up a royal bum, licking for a knighthood with my silver jubilee tongue. Thanks very much. Thank you, Miles. Thanks, Mercedes.
Hey, beat it.
That was wonderful. That was really, really wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Okay, that was just superb, and I can't go beyond that. I should have put you on last. Okay, I'll start with a poem that was written by a friend of mine, a poet and physician in Chicago. And he attended university in Chicago, and one of his professors was the professor who had published Ginsberg's Howl in the Alphabet Soup, I think was the name of the university magazine. And so he got he was sacked, he lost his job and tenure, and the whole process of going through the courts and having to justify the words that he'd used in Howl in his poem, which made a huge impression on the whole of the beat world at the time. To be banned was like the best thing that could happen, which is quite strange. But anyway, so Don gave up writing to become a surgeon, but he still writes. And this is a poem that he wrote in the 70s, or actually 80s, but looking back and also looking forward. It's called The Beats. They were outside, looking inside out. Blue-jeaned hipster rabbits, always checking melted pocket watches, and late for their 3 p.m, followed by Alice through the looking glass, down the bunny hole, daddy-o, a cappella bebop and Dion doo-wop. Prequel black beret beatnik charismatics, jazzy hazel-eyed behind dark shades, bristling porcupine quill goatees up at the mic, Ginsberg speaking in tongues, arcananundrum salafamadon. Catnap, cool cat, crazy cat, man. Howling poems in smoke-filled psilocybin coffeehouse auditoriums of the karmic mind, filled with congregations of black leotarded stick-figured chicks with thin lips, pursued by talk about beat being the cock of the walk. Double entendres thrown from their mouths like dice coming up snake eyes, turning into domino pips on the gleaming ivory faces of enraptured zealots, chanting Miyaho Ringo Kyo mantras, swirling like eddies in a Ganges river of ears, pulled downstream by ultimate life currents, funneled into vortices of phonemic ecstasy. Bebop bongo pop, Wowsville man. Smack like Kerouac on Route 66. Backseat vet setting shotguns strung out on morphines, mainlining Main Street America, while somnambulist Cassidy, delirious from white line fever, held the wheels steady and narcoleptic at 96.5. Like, Jack was never on the road, man. He was the road. Dig it? Straight from the jacket, Jack like a crackerjack Cadillac wrapped in Dali mohair inside a round Dada box, floating above the post-World War II mushroom cloud, pushing obscene tsunami towards Fisherman's Wharf, where Ferlinghetti faced Alcatraz spectres, sentenced to float and fog for 50 years and time off for good behaviour, where the killer crescendo A-bomb spark fractured the syntax of water and split the ripe commie watermelon of opiate mouths, spilling red onto San Francisco's bluesy shore, seeds spit out like AK bullets, turning into swallowtail butterflies, mid-air flying towards the 60s sky. Where Corso sat, reading Big Table magazine, sipping from a bowl of alphabet soup, whose letters spelled Strangelove in French. Where Lenny violated all taboos and broke the 12th commandment, thou shalt not curse in public. Where Burroughs waited, unaware cyber stalkers of the future would leave his naked lunch ignored on dusty shelves of forgotten bookstores, superseded by internet manhunters tracking homo ero holograms, lasered on virtual dance floor gas station bathrooms, trigger fingers on high octane pumps, squeezed into hyperdrive in dark parks where packs of immune deficient werewolves prowl beneath an 80s moon, where now 40 million forget to reminisce. So, thank you, yeah. Thank you, Don. He spoke of hip congregations of black leotarded, stick-figured chicks with thin lips. So he didn't think much of women either, really, did he? The 40s and 50s were times when women belonged to their parents first, and then their husbands. Their independence was either limited or non-existent. If they acted up, got out of line, or embarrassed their parents, they were punished brutally. For men, such humiliation resulted in being cut loose, thrown out of the family, thrown out onto the road. But for women, it meant mental hospitals, electroshock treatment, and being locked up at home and force-fed conservative values. There were not that many women in the beat poetry movement. A lot of the women did what women have always done, supported the husband and brought up the kids. One of them, who was a real poet in her own right, was Diane de Prima. She met Ginsberg and Kerouac in 1957. She wrote about their meeting in her Memoirs of a Beatnik. She published her first poetry collection, This Kind of Bird Flies Backwards, in 1958, and has since published 41 books. She also helped Amiri Baraka edit The Floating Bear, worked for many other publications, founded the American Theatre for Poets, and still teaches at Naropa and the New College of California. She wrote this poem, I think, in the mid to late 60s, but the influence of Ginsberg is very obvious. It's called Rant. You cannot write a single line without a cosmology, a cosmogony laid out before all eyes. There is no part of you can separate out, saying this is memory, this is sensation, this is the work I care about, this is how I make a living. It is whole. It is a whole. It always was whole. You do not make it so. There's nothing to integrate. You are a presence. You are an appendage of the work. The work stems from, hangs from the heaven you create. Every man, every woman carries a firmament inside, and the stars are in it, and they're not the stars in the sky. Without imagination, there is no memory. Without imagination, there is no sensation. Without imagination, there is no will, no desire. History is a living weapon in your hand, and you have imagined it. It is thus that you find out for yourself. History is the dream of what can be. It is the relation between things in a continuum of imagination. What you find out for yourself is what you select out of an infinite sea of possibility. No one else can inhabit your world. Yet it is not lonely. The ground of imagination is fearlessness. Discourse is a videotape of a movie of a shadow play, but the puppets are in your hand. Your counters in a multi-dimensional chess, which is divination and strategy. The war that matters is the war against the imagination. All other wars are subsumed to it. The ultimate famine is the starvation of imagination. It is death, to be sure, but the undead seek to inhabit someone else's world. The ultimate claustrophobia is the syllogism The ultimate claustrophobia is it all adds up. Nothing adds up. And nothing stands in for anything else. The only war that matters is the war against the imagination. The only war that matters is the war against the imagination. The only war that matters is the war against the imagination. All other wars are subsumed in it. There's no way out of a spiritual battle. There's no way you can avoid taking sides. There is no way you can not have a poetics, no matter what you do. Plumber, baker, teacher. You do it in the consciousness of making or not making your world. You have a poetics. You step into the world like a suit of ready-made clothes, or you etch in light. Your firmament spills into the shape of your room, the shape of the poem, of your body, of your loves. A woman's life, a man's life, is an allegory. Dig it. There is no way out of the spiritual battle. The war is the war against the imagination. You can't sign up as a conscientious objector. The war of the worlds hangs there, hangs here, right now in the balance. It is a war for this world, to keep it a veil of soul-making. The taste in all our mouths is the taste of power, and it is as bitter as death. Bring yourself home to yourself. Enter the garden. The guy at the gate with the flaming sword is yourself. The war is the war for the human imagination, and no one can fight it but you, and no one can fight it for you. The imagination is not only holy, it is precise. It is not only fierce, it is practical. Men die every day for the lack of it. It is vast and elegant. Intellectus means light of the mind. It is not discourse, it is not even language. The inner sun, the polis, is constellated around the sun. The fire is central. Thank you, yeah. Thank you, Diane de Prima, the powerful writer. Another of the women beats was Hetty Jones. She's my favourite character of the beat world, really, because she was a feisty little Jewish girl who married a black, who Leroy Jones. He changed his name later to Amiri Baraka when he became a Muslim, a Black Panther. But she was involved with him with feminism, race relationships, so many women working for their own rights. She was, and on top of that, and bringing up mixed race children, she wrote herself as well, and she was an editor. And so it was Hetty Jones and Amiri Baraka's Totem Press that published Diane de Prima's first volume of poetry. But it was Jones's marriage to Baraka that she was most famous for. That this is very unfair. I think an indictment of the sexism of modern reflection on the beats. But Jones also wrote some 23 books. She's been published in prestigious journals, lectured across America on writing, and started the literary magazine Jugend. Her poems to me are much more everyday accessible. This one is called Praise, for Marie Ponsot, a neighbour of hers, I believe. And it reminds me of another beat poet of the Ginsberg, was it, the supermarket poet? Praise. All praise the midweek market, the first of the season's sexy zucchinis gazing up from their crowded boxes. All praise the cherries, their tight red bellies, the sweet slender stems, and the pit, the pit, to be nursed in the mouth, cajoled to give up its last sweet hold. Praise them. praise all praise. That's from her anthology Doing 70. From her anthology called Drive is this one, Hard Drive. Saturday the stuffed bears were up again over the Major Deegan, dancing in plastic along the bridge rail under a sky half misty, half blue, and there were white clouds blowing in from the west, which would have been enough for one used to pleasure in small doses. But then later at sunset, driving north along the sawmill in a high wind, with clouds big and drifting above the road, like animals proud of their pink underbellies. In a moment of intense light, I saw an Edward Hopper house, at once so exquisitely light and dark that I cried all the way up Route 22, those uncontrollable tears as though the body were crying. And so, young women, here's the dilemma, itself the solution. I have always been at the same time woman enough to be moved to tears and man enough to drive my car in any direction. And another one from Doing 70, it's just 8 years ago she wrote this one. She's been writing poetry for 50 years maybe. Weather. My folder of poems labelled Weather holds no clues as to whether or not there'll be any weather to count on, say a hard rain like little nails, or that deluge plunging radiant. Now that we've plunged into war, and wars don't stop like rain stops, like that last slow drizzle onto the old tin bathroom vent, sweet hint of growth in the soft wet drift north. Fire or ice, fire or ice. Are you breathing? Are you lucky enough to be breathing? Okay, so I thought I'd finish up with an excerpt from a poem that Allen Ginsberg wrote to his mother, Naomi. It's called Kaddish. It's a very long poem and it's quite difficult one, but I love it, and so here it comes. So I'm just reading parts of it. 2 days after her death, I got her letter. Strange prophecies anew. She wrote, "The key is in the window. The key is in the sunlight at the window. I have the key. Get married, Alan. Don't take drugs. The key is in the bars, in the sunlight, in the window. Love, your mother," which is Naomi. Oh, mother, what have I left out? Oh, mother, what have I forgotten? Oh, mother, farewell. With a long black shoe, farewell. With Communist Party and a broken stocking, farewell. With 6 dark hairs on the wen of your breast, farewell. With your old black dress and a long black beard around the vagina, farewell. With your sagging belly, with your fear of Hitler, with your mouth of bad short stories, with your fingers of rotten mandolins, with your arms of fat Patterson porches, with your belly of strikes and smokestacks, with your chin of Trotsky and the Spanish War, with your voice of singing for the decaying, overbroken workers, with your nose of bad lay, with your nose of the smell of the pickles of Newark, with your eyes of Russia, with your eyes of no money, with your eyes of false China, with your eyes of Aunt Eleanor, with your eyes of starving India, with your eyes pissing in the park, with your eyes of America taking a fall with your eyes of your failure at the piano, with your eyes of your relatives in California, with your eyes of Ma Rainey dying in an ambulance, with your eyes of Czechoslovakia attacked by robots, with your eyes going to painting class at night in the Bronx, with the eyes of the killer grandma you see on the horizon from the fire escape, with your eyes running naked out of the apartment screaming into the hall, with your eyes being led away by policemen to an ambulance, with your eyes strapped down on the operating table, with your eyes with your pancreas removed, with your eyes of appendix operation, with your eyes of abortion, with your eyes of ovaries removed, with your eyes of shock, with your eyes of lobotomy, with your eyes of divorce, with your eyes of stroke, with your eyes alone, with your eyes, with your eyes, with your death full of flowers. Thank you very much, and you've been a great audience. Do you have a joke?
Well done. We just want to say well. I was terrified nobody would say well done to you, but we're all saying it.
Oh,
All right, so that was enjoyable, wasn't it?
yeah, let's do it again next year.
Well done. Give her a big.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, fellow poets. And
If you want more poetry, last Sunday of the month, High Tide Cafe. And listen, you're coming, you read it there. There's an open mic, so if you write yourself, come and read a poem. It's the 27th or something of this month, so there you go. Yeah. See, we want to have another go at the mic. Yeah, it's mic like that.
Thank you very much, Mercedes, for organising this wonderful evening. And I forgot, I meant to dedicate my reading tonight to Graham Brazier, who was one of our best songwriters, musicians, and he died last week, the age of 63. So, haere rā iho, and take care of yourself on the way.
if anybody has a poem they'd like to read, or something they'd like to say, or sing, or take the clothes off, or anything, you're very welcome. Otherwise, maybe we'll see you next year. Thank you very much.
You finished? You don't want me to play? You don't want me to play? That's all right. I don't have to. Don't worry, I can turn.
I could,
I don't know, do you want me to play or what?